Handling payments at a global scale is not an easy thing to do from scratch. You have to worry about things like PCI compliance, encrypting credit card data, storing credit card data securely, and all kinds of other regulatory issues that you'd never be able to do as an individual developer. Stripe, which is now one of the most valuable privately held companies, makes the entire payment handling process very straightforward and accessible to the average developer or team. It takes care of the security and compliance requirements and exposes a simple API that you can use to build a customized payment flow. It's been extremely popular with startups and scales up to the highest level. I like to think of the Stripe API as building blocks for handling any type of payment scenario. The most simple use case would be a single payment for a single product. But you might expect this user to return in the future, so you might save their payment details. Or you might set up a recurring subscription, and maybe you need to apply a coupon or discount to that subscription, or maybe the user can purchase additional add-ons to their subscription, or be billed dynamically based on their usage of your application. Stripe can handle all of this and more. And to get the ball rolling, you'll want to go ahead and sign up for a Stripe account if you haven't done so already. After you sign up, you'll have access to the Stripe dashboard. The dashboard allows you to manage customers, see all your payments and subscriptions, and all that good stuff. It also provides reporting and analytics that you should find useful. But the dashboard is really just a user interface for making calls to the Stripe API. The same thing we'll be doing from our backend JavaScript code throughout this course. Let's go ahead and take a look at how that works. First, go down here to the bottom left corner and flip the switch to test mode. This gives you a full sandbox to create and modify data in a way that doesn't pollute your actual real live data. Stripe provides a bunch of testing cards that we'll look at later where we can create fake charges here in the testing environment. We'll be using test mode throughout the course until we get to the end when it comes time to deploy the actual application to the cloud. Now let's go ahead and create your first customer manually on the dashboard. You can add whatever information you want for the customer, but the main thing that you'll want in a production app is the email address. If you click on it, you'll see the details that you saved about the customer, as well as the option to add credit cards, payment sources, and things like that. But by clicking the Create Customer button, what we actually did there is made an API call to Stripe. Specifically, we made a post request to the customer's endpoint. And we can see that here on the dashboard because Stripe keeps a log of everything that happens to this customer. This is extremely useful for debugging, and if you go to the Developers tab, Stripe will show you where all of the errors are occurring throughout your application, because you're likely going to be more interested when it's an error versus a successful request. Now back in our customer record, if we click on the log entry, you can see it will tell us exactly what was sent in the post request and back from Stripe as the response. If you're new to APIs, this is a very important concept because everything in Stripe follows this request response pattern. We made a request to the Stripe API to create a new customer, and we provided this JSON data as the request body for the data to use when creating that customer. Stripe received that request, then created the customer on the Stripe server. Then it responded back with the newly created customer information. The response JSON contains a bunch of data that's explained in the Stripe documentation, and most of it you won't need. In fact, it's very likely that the only thing you'll need is the customer ID. When we build our application, we'll take this customer ID and save it in our database. This will allow us to later attach a credit card to that user or create a subscription or anything else we want to do related to this customer. The main point I want to get across here is that everything in Stripe is just a request response pattern. You make a request to a specific API endpoint with some data. Stripe will try to execute whatever you're requesting, like charging a credit card, and then Stripe will respond back with all the data that you could possibly want related to that request, like whether or not the charge was successful. Now, in most cases, you'll be making a request to Stripe from your API, but there are some cases where Stripe might need to contact you when something has happened on the API, like for example, if you have a recurring payment set up, and you want to be notified when that payment has been paid or if it has failed to pay. The way we facilitate this is with webhooks. We'll look at this more in the billing section of the course, but I did want to provide a quick primer for you here. Basically, it allows you to listen to different events that happen within the Stripe API. When these events happen, Stripe will send a request to your API endpoint, and that request will contain a bunch of data that you can act upon. For example, if you have a recurring payment and the payment fails to go through, you might receive that request from Stripe, then update the user's record in the database to past due. So in other words, webhooks provide a way for you to listen to important events that happen within the Stripe API, and again, we'll look at setting those up later in the course. So that's a basic overview of Stripe and what it can do for you. In the next video, we'll look at how API keys work within a Stripe project.